that's not a hard thing to say they've improved. There's no question they did. My question is, every team that I've ever been a part of that thought they were one player away never ended up being one player away. So are they really that good?
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. Now here is your host, Stormy Buonantony, on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Time for Lombardi's List. Michael, you had some homework last night. You went through all of these free agent signings, even though, again, none of them are technically real for another couple hours still to come. But it was interesting looking through your list here because it's not like it's just big splash name after big splash name. It looks to be a lot more about fit and, puzzle pieces going where they fit best. Like, talk me through just your thought process a little bit before we get down to some of these names on what made you select them.
Well, I think, look, it's everybody goes for the big name. And I think, to me, sometimes in free agency, it's the combination of the contract and the player. And I think that's what I tried to bring to the table here in terms of you get a good player for good value, which is hard to do on the first day of free agency. But some of these teams, I think, accomplished it. Now, it doesn't solve all their problems, but I can identify a philosophy that's at least going on within their team, right? And that's important for me because if you don't have a philosophy, which means if you don't have a plan, you're just grab bagging. You're over here. Oh, let's sign that guy. No, let's sign this guy. Oh, let's sign this guy. No. What's the plan? What are we going to do and how are we going to approach this? Because it has to be strategic because you're spending money. You just can't just start, okay, we're going to spend money over here. No, wait a minute. Well, now we don't have money over here. It has to fit a philosophy. So that's what I tried to look for in free agency. I can see it with Houston. I could see it with some other teams.
There is one big name that almost made your list and did not. Why? Who is that player and why?
Well, it was Cousins because that's the easy one, right? I mean, obviously, when you have one of the worst quarterbacks in the league in Desmond Ridder and you sign one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league in Kirk Cousins, I mean, that's not a hard thing to say they've improved. There's no question they did. My question is, every team that I've ever been a part of that thought they were one player away never ended up being one player away. You never are. I mean, look, this team gave up almost 75 points the last 2 weeks of the season, 38 to 47 to New Orleans, and I think they gave up 38 to the Bears. So are they really that good? They have no pass rusher. They've got to get better in that area because if they're going to play from in front, they're going to. Now, the other thing is we think this line is really good. Kirk doesn't move, and he's coming off an Achilles. Can he move better than he did before the Achilles? I don't know. I think that's the hard thing to figure out. I'm not saying it's not going to be great. I'm just saying I'm not going down that road of the path of least resistance.
Which, speaking to the medical side of this, can we talk about how a move like this occurring just proves that tampering occurs, not the legal come on, I'm not calling anybody out here. Okay, I guess I technically am. But these teams cannot share medical actual information until later on today. So the fact that Atlanta is you're not realistically telling me Atlanta's just going off of what they saw Kirk do on the tennis courts and dancing on stage at NFL honors. You have information.
Here's what happens is the agent has some of the medical information because they'll send the guy to an independent doctor. So they'll have some of the medical. And then they'll share that with teams. They'll share it with every team that's interested. And so
that deal broke 2 hours into legal tampering, though. It wasn't like it took 2 days.
But he still hasn't passed his physical. He hasn't passed his physical, which obviously they feel he's not going to pass the physical right now.
Yeah.
Because he's not healthy to play. Pass the physical means you are healthy to play. But they're taking this risk, and they've guaranteed the contract for skill and injury, so they're bought in. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like, Andrew Bynum. I mean, the 76ers took him hook, line, and sinker, and the only thing he could do was bowl, and he got hurt bowling. They never saw him play.
Okay, let's hit your top
Not that
five.
I'm bitter. Not that I'm bitter, Stormy. Not that I'm bitter about that trade.
Not
okay?
one bit. Let's get to your top five, though. These are in no particular order. But I see the one we have pulled up here, at least, first, is the Raiders signing Christian Wilkins.
Look, if you're going to spend a lot of money, get a good player, right? Get a guy who's in a top 10 of his position, top 5, and Wilkins is that guy. He can rush from the inside, and I believe this, strength on strength matters, right? So when you have a strong point with Max Crosby and you have Malcolm Kuntz, who did a nice job, Tyree Wilson needs to come on. Remember, they took him over Jalen Carter. You know, it's always funny, Stormy, is if teams would do the obvious – the next year they don't have to spend money. We had Chris Sims on. If the Jets would have signed Bryce Huff, they wouldn't have drafted a defensive end, and then they wouldn't be down this road. If the Raiders would have drafted Jalen Carter, they wouldn't have needed to sign Christian Wilkins. They would have been a better team, but they drafted Tyree Wilson. They got Kuntz now, who's beating him out. They moved him inside. But now their defensive line is a strong point. It's starting to come together. And I think when you build strength on strength, it's a good thing. Yeah,
and you talk about at least the identity that Antonio Pierce wants to create on that side of the ball and the Mahomes rules comments and all of those things. Like, you've got another agitator now in Christian Wilkins. He's that guy you love to have on your team, hate to play against him. Max Crosby was the 8th most double-teamed edge rusher in the NFL last year. In steps Christian Wilkins, who ranked 5th in sacks created. Also, let's go to the Minnesota Vikings. You liked a couple of their signings here.
Yeah. I love Aaron Jones. I think he's still a good player. When healthy, he's a really good player. You could see the difference in Green Bay's team last year on the field. I love Van Ginkel. Nobody plays harder. He's relentless. He'll fit perfectly into Brian Flores' defense because they'll move him all over the place. And Greenard is a really good player, Comes off the edge. He may not be as good as Danielle Hunter, but he's younger. He's got more juice and longer way to play. I think those 3 players, they fill the needs perfectly, and they're good players. And I think that's a really good move for them. Now, obviously, as Christopher Sims said, they've got problems at the quarterback position, but you don't make these moves when you have Kirk Cousins eating all the pasta. You know, when you have him eating all the meal, you can't do any of this stuff. You're trapped. And then you walk around saying, well, Kirk's a good player, but we don't have a good team.
I'm curious to see how they end up playing this in the draft. Obviously, do have Sam Darnold as that bridge guy, 1 year, $10 million. It is also dead to me season, and one of the joking dead to me's was Lamar Jackson to Geno Stone, who heads to Cincinnati. You like that move?
Love this move because, look, Cincinnati, you know, when they had Von Bell and they had Jesse Bates, this defense was really good. And I think what happens to a lot of us because we don't get to be brought inside a defensive huddle is the communication required to play great defense, especially when you have a good coordinator like Lou Anarumo, who's got a lot of checks within the system, right? You need somebody to communicate. You know, Napoleon said one of the greatest things in battle is communication. Well, it's the same thing in football. You've got to be able to communicate perfectly. And they missed that last year. Playing 2 young players back there didn't work. They made too many mistakes, not noticeable to the tape, but noticeable to people that understand what they're doing. Geno Smith will give them that player. Geno Smith is a really good player. He's smart, he's instinctive, and he'll be like having Lou Anarumo on the field for them.
We talked about Carolina earlier and how they lose Brian Burns, but also Frankie Luvu, Jeremy Chinn, both now Washington Commanders.
Yeah, and then, you know, add Brandon McManus, okay? Yeah. Look, Washington, Joey Silva, I mean, that was pot luck whether he was going to make a kick or not. I think these 2 guys, plus they get Eckler at a really cheap deal. They get Dorrance Armstrong, who's a good player. I mean, they're, you know, one thing about Washington, they were so bad on defense that these guys will certainly help. They've got more speed on the field. Luva's a really good player. Like, I don't know why Carolina just let him go. The same thing with Chinn. He was hurt last year. Like, I just don't understand it, you know, and Morgan was there for all these players. He's got to know them. Like, I don't understand you just let these guys out the door.
Yeah. Washington had the worst defense in the league, and it wasn't close. So good for them trying to get some guys in there. And your last one here, again, these are no particular order, but the big man headed to L.A., Jonah Jackson.
Yeah, I like that, and I like the Colby Parkinson move. I think, to me, the Rams are smart. They need to be strong inside. They got their offensive line kind of figured out now. It's much better than it was 2 years ago. And I don't know how much depth. You know, they finally have cap room. They didn't overspend on the cap room. They get another tight end to come in to go with Higbee. So, look, this Ram team is good, right? They're good. They're going to be good on offense. The key is going to be for the Rams is can they keep the quarterback healthy? You know, and that's going to be critical because if they have to go to the backup, whether it's Carson Wentz wherever Stetson Bennett is, he must have taken that 3-hour boat cruise with Mr. Howell because we can't find him.
Yeah, still MIA, that Stetson Bennett is. But to your point, huge to keep Matthew Stafford upright. And you got Jackson on one side, Dotson on the other. That's you got some big men up front protecting him now for the Los Angeles Rams, a team that certainly exceeded expectations this past year.